There are different types of production systems for alternative livestock. First one we're going to be talking about is the conventional or the commercial type of system where they are fed dry hay and grains with very limited access to the outside, or if they do go outside, there's nothing for them to eat there. They're strictly um, kept on a very regimented diet that is controlled. Second one is 100% pasture, where the animals are allowed outside, have access to the outside at all times, green pasture, forage to eat. The third one is a combination of pasture and grain, where they're allowed outside, but they're also supplemented with grains in order to increase their weight gain. Then there's also certified organic, which doesn't make any distinction between the use of pasture and grain is certainly fine, but they are very restrictive as far as you must buy certified organic grain, and the pasture that you do have them on, the land needs to be certified organic also. So we'll be talking about these different systems more in detail. So just a quick reminder of how the digestive systems of the different animals we'll be talking about work. Sheep and goats are considered ruminants. They have a four-chambered stomach, one of which is the rumen, contains lots of microbes and protozoan that help to break down the fibrous material and forages that they eat. They're also cud chewing, which means that they regurgitate the bolus and chew on it some more and then swallow it once again. Poultry, on the other hand, are generalists. They take in their food, they hold it in their crop for a while as it moves through. So they can hold, it's kind of like a big sack that they're able to hold the food, and then it makes its way down to the gizzard, which is a very strong, tough muscle for grinding the food. It also contains grit that the birds have taken in from the soil or the sand that they're from on, which helps to make this grinding action. So they're able to grind very tough seeds, whole seeds, other things that they're can handle. So that grain is one thing that they do quite well on. A conventional production system we think of as we'll have a feedlot or a confinement system uh, where the animals are on no pasture at all. In the case of sheep and goats, many times they are started out on pasture for some amount of time, and then they're moved into a feedlot, which are just paddocks where they are able to feed them a certain amount of food, a certain kind of food. They can control the amount of food and exactly what the animals are eating. They can also, they're able to increase the weight gain with grain. So it can be anywhere from some hay with lots of grain, or just mostly forage or dry hay with some grain, all depending on what kind of system they're doing. Uh, Ruminants are supplemented with the hay for roughage. They do require some hay in order for their rumen to work correctly. Chickens do quite well in this kind of system. They're able to grow very fast, very quickly. Those broilers we had talked about earlier, able to grow those in about 6 to 8 weeks, many times 5.5 weeks before they get processed, strictly by being fed grains and other animal byproducts. One thing to keep in mind when feeding grain to the ruminants is that they did not evolve to eat the grain. They really, naturally, they eat grasses and shrubs and leaves. And two things can, very serious problems can happen when you are feeding the grains. First thing is acidosis, which is caused from large quantities of acid being produced in the rumen, and the they will die very quickly um, from this disease. And the other one is enterotoxemia, which is caused by a bacteria that's naturally in their gut, but then an explosion of the bacteria when they're fed too much grain. See this most of the time in very young lambs, 1 to 4 months old, and they can be in excellent health and start feeling kind of sick, and then in a few days they can be dead. Be very careful with this, and I would advise that you vaccinate them against this disease. Very easy to do. A 100% pasture system or 100% grass-fed system means that livestock are never fed grain. So this system would not work for any kind of poultry. Poultry is going to need grain in order to um, get up to their correct body weight. You won't be able to do that just on grass. Although they do eat grass, but it's just not enough for them to grow adequately. When we talk about 100% pasture, we're thinking of the goats and the sheep. Um, so that means that they would never be fed grain. Um, their meat does not have as much marbling, it's quite a bit leaner. There is a taste difference. And one of the things that for health conscious people is that they do prefer the 100% grass fed because it's more beneficial as far as the increase in omega 3s or the proportion of omega 3s to omega 6s is a much better ratio. A lot more omega 3s in the grass fed. Being a combination of pasture and grain fed works very well for goats in particular, and can work pretty good with sheep. But many of the goats, especially in the Midwest, have a hard time gaining weight strictly on a 100% grass-fed diet. They seem to do a little bit better with some grain in their system. Will help them to get up to a good carcass size for market. You just have to bear in mind that you have to be very careful about how much grain you're giving and the possibility of um, the diseases that we spoke about. In a certified organic system, there is no stipulation from the USDA that the livestock have to be 100% grass fed. Certainly, supplementing with grain is just fine as long as that grain comes from and has been certified organic before you feed it to those animals. If we were to compare the two different systems, a confinement operation and a 100% pasture raised operation, uh, there's some costs that are quite different on either end. So let's first, in a confinement operation, generally you just need a small acreage as opposed to the 100% pasture, where you would be best off with a large farm because you're going to have to move them around to the different pastures. Um, of course, this all depends on how many animals you're planning to raise, but so if we're just looking at the small acreage for a confinement operation, you have lower land costs, of course, whereas if you have a lot of land, you're going to have an increase in land cost. Um, The housing cost for confinement is increased because you have to have something to keep them in all the time. So you're going to have a pretty solid structure um, with water, and it can get pretty pricey. You probably want to have a concrete floor so that's easy to clean out. Um, you're also going to have costs for bedding. And then on the other side, for animals that are out on pasture, your housing costs are fairly low because you're moving them around. So really, you just need some kind of very slight movable structure. Doesn't cost very much. You will have to figure out some kind of system for watering them if you're moving them. Um, you don't need to worry about any kind of bedding. In a confinement operation, the feed costs tend to be higher because you have to buy all of the feed, but the the grains can offset your price of hay, can end up being quite a bit less. So that's the type of thing you really need to take a look at individually. Hard to make generalizations on that one. And 100% pasture raised, your feed costs are going to be low because you are just moving them around on the grass. Of course, you will need to have reseed periodically and make sure that your pastures are in good condition in order to have the best nutrients for your animals. The confinement operation tend to have less time to finish because you're feeding them grain, which makes them get bigger faster. And then in 100% pasture, depending on the type of animal and the quality of nutrition, sometimes they will take longer to finish. But then you have the increased nutritional quality, going back to the omega-3s, that the grain-fed does not provide. As far as labor costs go, both of them are, some labor has to be available and paid for. Confinement, somebody has to go every day, most times twice a day, to feed them and check on them. In a pasture-raised operation, you're going to be moving them around, making sure that they do have fresh pasture on a regular basis. Um, and both of them are really customer driven. Some people really like the 100% pasture, 100% grass-fed meat, and some people don't. They don't care for that flavor. They like that marbling. They like the flavor of the grain-fed livestock. So you'll have to figure out these costs yourself, and we'll get into more costing out and planning in one of our later units.